So we have much to cover today as a new week begins, and some of the last few days have been filled with some of the most stunning developments in the Middle East. Some say that these last few weeks have been as tectonic a shift, to use the geological metaphor, in the Middle East as at almost any time in recent history. And they have involved good things, messy things, because war is messy. They say war is hell, and it is. There's a lot of death going on. But I have to tell you that the good guys are winning. And Israel is in the process of moving toward a time when Gaza is neutralized, Hezbollah is neutralized. We had the pagers explode. We had the walkie-talkies explode. Then we had the leader of Hezbollah explode. That is a sweet, sweet wartime trifecta. To analyze that and a number of other things that may yet happen, one of the things I always like doing is going to talking to people who are smarter than I am on a whole lot of things. And over at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, at FDD on Twitter, is their Senior Vice President of Research, my friend Jonathan Schanzer. Jonathan, welcome, sir. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be with you.
So it's good. The pendulum is swinging in a good direction for those of us who actually want Israel to win. We'll get to the political divide over that in America in just a minute. So tell us, how close to being done with this war are we? I think you've warned people not to take this really good stretch of developments for Israel and think we're about done here.
Yeah, it's a little soon to do a dance in the end zone and spike the football. I think we're probably looking at a couple of hard weeks in front of us here. The Israelis are now about to potentially go in on the ground and to start to engage with Hezbollah. They have a formidable army. This is an army that has trained and fought alongside Russia and Iran. And so they know how to engage in some of the brutal tactics that we've seen those two armies deploy in recent years in places like Syria. But I think even beyond that, Hezbollah has an arsenal of something like 200,000 rockets. Now, a bunch of those were destroyed over the weekend. The Israelis have gone after some of the more strategic weapons, in fact, hitting some civilian homes and apartment buildings that house them in the basement. So they destroyed some of their more significant capabilities. But as we've seen over the course of the day, Israel continues to take incoming. We're talking about drones and missiles and rockets and attempts to saturate Israeli airspace, attempts to overwhelm that very successful and effective Iron Dome missile defense system. Bottom line is Hezbollah is a military that is assessed by the Israelis to be roughly equal in strength to that of a mid-size European nation. So think like Czech Republic. This is what the Israelis are dealing with. Now, the good news is they've lost about 75% of their leaders and maybe a third of their capabilities, maybe even up to a half. But the problem is that there are still leaders that are still living and they are in control of that arsenal. And there are tens of thousands of fighters who are eagerly awaiting an opportunity to engage with the IDF.
So if they've been degraded from Czech Republic down to maybe Bulgaria size on the way to oblivion, that's a good thing. And if indeed, as you've described it, I heard your words there, a couple of hard weeks, what if those don't go as expected? Is there a possibility of the pendulum swinging back? I mean, there's an angry, cornered foe is a particularly dangerous one.
No, I think that's the real risk here. Is the Israelis have swung the momentum in a massive way, right? I mean, they took out a ton of top leaders from Hezbollah. They attacked the Houthis in Yemen. They hit Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria over the weekend. I mean, literally, the hits just keep on coming. And then you insert those ground troops into Lebanon where they may start to get caught, right? Where they will find surprises that they weren't ready for. That's a real possibility. You could see the momentum shift. Look, what the Israelis are doing right now, though, they're playing this smart. They have put special operators on the ground. What they're doing right now is trying to gather intelligence. They're trying to figure out what assets they can destroy from the air before they put in that larger contingent of ground forces. They're trying to do this the right way, but will they be able to assess everything that is waiting for them? That's a tough one for me, and I do think that fighting Hezbollah will not be a walk in the park. And so, yeah, we could begin to see some of that momentum slow. I think a key here, quite frankly, is the United States. We should be putting pressure on Iran on Hezbollah, on the Houthis. We should be squeezing from every possible angle, diplomatic, political, military, economic, every possible way we can to push Iran into a corner.
Let's take a quick pause. Jonathan Schanzer is here, Senior VP of Research for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. What will Iran do if the Hezbollah forces that they have financed and built are wiped from the battlefield? We'll ask that and a number of other things when we continue on America First. Mark Davison for Dr. Gorka. Stick around. Jonathan Schanzer is here from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, where he's the Senior VP of Research, and we've talked about Israel's progress that they are making, and that is good news as the pendulum swings. What shape might it take if indeed the success that those of us who support Israel, if we see the success that we want, what might Iran do? I guess the possibilities are they could go, well, we've learned our lesson and sort of slink away to lick their wounds. Or they could respond with great anger, great force, and maybe even a nuclear fashion. So it's impossible to know. Nobody's crystal ball is necessarily any better. There's no reading of minds. But what should we be doing? What should all of us who care about this region be thinking about what Iran may do as they watch the events on the ground?
Yeah, look, I think, Mark, you're raising some excellent questions, and obviously no one has a crystal ball here, but I think there are a couple of different ways that this could go. The first is that we could just find ourselves in a war of attrition here in the Middle East for quite some time, and this would benefit Iran, where they just continue to fire occasional rockets, deploy these various forces, these various militias and proxies that they have around the region. It doesn't have to necessarily be a bright, hot war. It can be something of a low-level war, which I think, Iran would like to hurt Israel economically and, psychologically erode Israeli society. And I think that's what he has been doing. But he would be down a couple of proxies. Hamas is pretty well beat up at this point, and Hezbollah may be on the way. The other thing that could happen is that it could really escalate with those different proxies. We call this the ring of fire strategy that they have. We're talking about the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq and Syria, whatever's left of Hezbollah, whatever's left of Hamas. And then, of course, there's Iran itself. They've fired weapons at Israel. The West Bank has yet to fully erupt and still could. And so there's a seven-front war that could seriously escalate. From there, the biggest escalation would, of course, be a breakout for a nuclear weapon. We know they've been flirting with this. They've been tinkering with it for quite some time. Could they decide to use this moment while Israel's on the verge of destroying Hezbollah to use this as a means to tell Israel to back down and we start to see a nuclear standoff in the Middle East? Yeah, that's certainly possible. But the thing that we want here more than anything else is sort of a return to 1988. And that was when we had the Iran-Iraq War, and the United States, with others, international pressure, we forced an end to that conflict. It was not conclusive at the end of the day. And the Ayatollah back then said that he had no choice but to drink from what he called the poison chalice, which means standing down, backing off, if the idea was to live to fight another day. That's what I think the U.S., coupled with Israel and perhaps some other international partners, that's what we should be looking at right now, forcing Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, to drink from that poison chalice.
That would be great. Is there a difference, though, between Iran reaching a moment of clarity in a war against Iraq versus Iran reaching a moment of clarity when they've just been severely spanked with American-made weapons against the great Satan of Israel as they view it? Isn't there a lot more poison in this particular chalice?
There would be. But by the way, I just want to let you know that we here in the United States are considered to be the great Satan. Israel's only the little Satan. But either way, getting beat up by the two Satans, that's a tough one for them to swallow. No question about it. But really, I think it has to come down to the U.S. giving Israel the opportunity that it needs right now to press the advantage, right? They've had a hell of a weekend, right? They have really beat up on Hezbollah, and they're showing Iran that they have full penetration of all these different proxies. They know who to hit. They know where to hit. They know when to hit. If they can keep doing that for another week or two, and really they don't take their foot off the neck of Iran or its proxies, I think you could eventually get there. But again, a lot needs to happen. And most importantly, this ambivalent Biden administration that has just been so weak-kneed as it comes to Israel for the last, I'm going to say 5 or 6 months, really since March. They were great in the beginning, and they really began to lose their mettle. This cannot happen over the next couple of weeks. Israel needs to reestablish that deterrence, re-inspire fear in the hearts of its enemies. They started to do it. Now, the big question is, will the Biden administration just simply let them win?
They did say the right things early on. It's easy to say the right things, but then you have to follow that up with doing the right things. And I don't believe that the Hamas wing of the Democrat Party will allow them to do that. So if we are blessed with a Trump victory, which those of us on our political side and those of us on Israel's side, one would presume that is desired, is a return to an Abraham Accords style status quo possible? And why don't you give everybody Abraham Accords 101 and what those were and why they were so wonderful?
Sure. I mean, look, this was the deal cut by former President Trump, first between the UAE and Israel, and then also Bahrain. We added to that, actually, Morocco and Sudan. The Sudan one's fallen apart. The other three have held. And the idea was that it was going to herald really a new Middle East. And we looked like things were well on their way. As a guy that's been to Saudi Arabia a number of times, I really got the sense that the Saudis were close to joining the Abraham Accords as well. And then 10/7 happened, right? The October 7th attacks of last year. Israel is thrust into a war. All of a sudden, it doesn't look like peace is about to break out, but instead it looks like a regional war. And as Israel begins to tackle the thorny problem of Hamas, Israel gets dragged into these questions about, humanitarian concerns for the people of Gaza. It became really difficult for the Saudis to continue to negotiate, to continue to engage with the Israelis. But now I got to tell you, what happened over the weekend may have changed things a little bit. The Israelis ended up striking hard at the Houthis. The Houthis are, of course, this terrorist organization backed by Iran, operating out of Yemen. For many years, all they did was attack Saudi Arabia. The Saudis were forced by the administration to stop fighting back. That should sound a bit familiar. The Biden administration forced them to stand down. And now the Israelis are doing exactly what the Saudis would have wanted to do. That has got to be an inspiration. Watching the Israelis win out against Hezbollah and Hamas also, I think, has to give the Saudis at least some sense of the strength of a potential power they could work with.
So much appreciated, and you should appreciate the existence of something like the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and Jonathan Schanzer, their Senior VP of Research. Thank you, sir. Mark Davis in for Seb. Be right back.